warm welcome to my next guest on Manufacturing Leaders. So today we welcome Chris Balmer, who I've had the pleasure of working with both as a candidate and a client. So Chris has worked his way up in manufacturing, starting as a production operator in Cheadle, UK. Been lucky enough to work with some excellent companies in the industry, including Nissan and Nestle. 7 months ago, Chris made the move into renewables and is currently operations manager at AR Power in Washington. So Chris, welcome to Manufacturing Leaders. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, looking forward to getting into it, mate. So first question I always like to ask everyone. So what does it mean to you to be a leader?
I think for me personally, I'm very driven, very passionate. And I like to kind of spread that across the teams that I lead. I like to give people a platform to succeed and to grow. But for me, I get personal enjoyment out of seeing that as well. I'm always, as a leader, I believe in being someone that will roll up your sleeves and get stuck in as well. The old saying, I wouldn't expect someone to do something I wouldn't, to be honest. So for me, it's that. It's about providing clear direction. And making a happy place for people to work. I mean, the last thing anyone wants, and I've seen it when I've before went into management, where you're working alongside people and everyone's got the gripes and the moans and the groans, and no one's ever heard. And it's kind of like, for me, I want to provide that platform where people have a voice, people to listen to, and actually enjoy coming to work. I don't want to hear their moans and groans throughout the day in the office. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I think we spoke before. I think we share that same vision, and I think the appreciation for how important culture is now, and I think people want that so much more than potentially they used to. It was
absolutely, and it's the hardest thing to get right for me. It's to go in somewhere and set the culture you expect. It can be the hardest thing to get right. But when it works, it's brilliant.
100%, excellent. So yeah, I love that. So look, let's take it right back then to Cheadle, UK. So I mean, how did you get into manufacturing? What was the sort of thought process for you to sort of this is for me?
So there wasn't, to be honest. If I go back to when I left school, I had no clear plan. I had no aspirations really. And my dad at the time was a research and development manager for a flow and chimney manufacturer. Yeah. In Cheadle, and I remember one night within the first week of his leaving that my dad was very driven as well. He come in, kind of said, right, what's your plans, etc. Said to him at the time it was kind of be a fireman, and I was happy to sit around and wait for that to happen.
Yeah.
And then the following night he came in with a pair of safety boots and some overalls and kind of chucked them at us and said, you start tomorrow. So I started as a production operator at Cheadle, and then it was 6 years from that, which was supposed to be a temporary stopgap for me while I thought about what I wanted to do. It was 6 years before I left. So nice. Spent 3 years and on leaving Cheadle, I left there with a diploma in business and operations management, having successfully been a production planner for 3 years, and that really paved kind of a career path for me. And it was during that time, to be honest, when I really got the motivation to want to succeed in life. I wasn't great at school. I didn't stick in. But when I went there, I thought to myself, as a production operator, and I seen all these people in the offices and people getting promoted and stuff like that. And I just thought, I want some of that. Yeah. So it was through them experiences going into on-the-job kind of work that it really kind of opened my eyes into what kind of future I could have.
Love that. And you've worked for a variety of different companies in manufacturing and different industries in particular, I guess, haven't you? I mean, do you think, if you think of the role you're now, have you benefited from having that variety of experience?
Massively. I'd say you look at all these different processes, different applications, and there's so many. You look at Lean Six Sigma and just in time and things like that, and there's so many different ways of applying it. And I've been lucky enough to see how it's applied in different industries. Yeah. What I've always tried to do is take them different learnings and kind of piece them together and see what works and what doesn't. Hasn't always worked for us, but that's the continuous improvement cycle. You start again, you go back to the fresh. But I've had an excellent career in terms of the different industries. I made a choice, and although from CV perspective, I made a choice of moving around to learn more. I'm someone that's very big on learning, so I purely made that choice to move around, learn these different industries, environments, and I think it's put us in very good stead, to be honest. And I'm very thankful for the career I've had up to this date, to be honest.
And I like the fact you mentioned there in terms of you proactively understood the importance of potentially putting yourself into different situations and maybe outside your comfort zone to learn.
100%, yeah.
And I think a lot of people stay in their comfort zone. Not necessarily a bad thing if you can improve, but like you say, for you to go, right, for me to be where I want to be, it's obviously been quite a vision you to go, right, okay, I know I need to work and stretch myself and work from different types of businesses to eventually get where you are now at the age you are, at young age. So, that's obviously worked. And the management side then, I mean, when was it, again, similar to getting to manufacturing, when was the time for you that you thought, management's for me, this is, or was it an organic sort of process that just happened?
It just happened. So, as I mentioned, I'm naturally driven, naturally passionate, and I'll do that whatever role I'm in, be it management or not. And it was during my time as a planner when I went from manufacturing into the renewable industry for the first time. I had to deal with hundreds of technicians moving across from site to site across the UK at short notice. And I had a real natural ability to build a good rapport with them, which really helps when you're ringing someone up saying, I need you to go from your house at short notice to this site halfway across the country, disrupting your family life and things like that. And when you're having them conversations, I'm sure you can appreciate it. It's not as easy. Some people have their knowns and groans, but for me, it seemed to come natural. People related to us. I was understanding. I listened to people's gripes if they had them, but I would feed back as well. So within that time, there was an opportunity to come up. I think I was 12 months into the role. The opportunity came up to build a team of technicians that were specifically going to look at major project work, executing warranty tasks and things like that. So there was me and a few other applicants, and I was successful in getting that. I think it was 26 or 27 at the time when I first went into my first management role. And when you're building a team, so I built a team of 34 to 35 technicians. And when you're building a team at that age, to build a team of all these ex-military engineers, and you're at 26, 27, trying to tell them what they needed to do and where they're going, it was challenging, but and that's when I realized I had a natural ability for management, because I brought them along and we had a high-performing team, and it was an extremely enjoyable time, and we had a good team ethic, all worked well together, and I had very good relationships with the staff. And from that, I kind of always wanted to be in management roles.
Yeah, excellent.
Just because the benefits I got from it, and the kind of rewarding factor for me, the personal rewarding outweighed anything else. I couldn't then just sit back and be part of a team. I wanted to build that positive environment for people.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine that's a real challenge, I guess. Say suddenly managing a team of people who are older than you, I imagine, and some of more experience and different environments. So, mindset-wise, did you accept that you just have to front this up and then learn the job, or did you how did you get through that sort of mental?
So one thing I've never tried to do is if people know their job, they know the technical details of it, they know the ins and outs, I'll use that to my advantage. I'll never try and tell someone to do something if they know better than me. But what I will do is try and understand it. Maybe it's not the technical detail. I'll show an interest. I'll learn to understand it. But I'll also trust people to do the job they're employed to do. And I think that's a big thing in any management role. If you're employing someone, you need to trust that they can do the job they're doing. That again has always put me in good stead in terms of the relationships I've had with people. You have to trust the people that work for you, and that for me in that industry and at that time was probably one of the most rewarding things. I mean, one of the things I used to get praised for is that these guys are on sites across the UK. Management had a head office. Yet I would spend half my time traveling around the UK to make sure I was face to face speaking to them in person. I think I've done one-to-ones on wind turbines and things like that, just to be in their environment. and it helps. It's a lot easier than dragging them to an office and sitting them down and having a one-to-one in my environment. You know what I mean?
It's getting that respect, isn't it?
100%. And like I say, we had a great team in that industry.
Do you find, because I mean, if I just think of my personal mentality in regard to managing a team, I think I'm similar to you in the sense that, you know, I'm driven by, I guess I'm a people pleaser, but I like people to be happy, and you know, I'm driven by making sure they work for me and with me to some extent. The flip side of that, I actually find it difficult on the consequence and discipline side. You know, step out of line, because I find that hard. And I've got better at that over the years, but I still find that uncomfortable. I mean, how do you feel in that situation where you have to be that?
It's hard, but like you say, it becomes a necessity at times. You have to find a balance. So for me, I'm not the type of manager that rules with an iron fist. My team know that, but with that, they show a certain level of respect, because what I will do is, if I need to pull someone to one side, before I go down the kind of discipline route, I'll have a quiet word and just say, look, you need to improve on this. I don't want to have to like sit you down and discuss it and then start looking at performance improvement plans and things like that. If the necessity, I'll do it. But I'll always try and put it across that I'm doing it for the benefit of the person, as well as the business. It's like, look, I'm trying to help you in your career path, your direction, your future. Kind of listen to the advice we're given. But also, one of the big things I do is try and understand in situations, is there a reason someone you need to go have that conversation with them? Is there underlying factors? In a lot of instances, you find there is. So I'm a great believer in sitting down and listening to someone before jumping to conclusions.
It's that emotional intelligence, isn't it? I guess
it is, and trust us. It takes a lot of. There's a lot of times I've sat in scenarios at the age of 26, 27 when I'm trying to get to the end decision. Whereas now I've had that many discussions with people, you learn to sit back, relax, and eventually you'll come to the end, whether it be a good one or a bad one. You just got to ride the process.
I love that. And like you say, everything comes back to culture, doesn't it? And I guess, you know, if by the sounds of it, they'll walk over hot coal for you, and they know that you'll do the same for them. And I think if you got that level of respect, then they don't want to disappoint you, and they want you to achieve, and you're part of the same vision. So
that's it.
No better team with that.
Yeah. If you build that culture, it makes any manager's job easy, to be fair, because you don't really necessarily have to have them conversations.
You know, completely. I mean, for you, what's the most enjoyable aspect? If someone said, "Why do you love being a manager?" What would you say?
Oh, for me, I think the biggest thing I get from it is giving others a platform to kind of achieve their own goals, watching people succeed. I've seen great people come and go because they've outgrown kind of my departments and my teams and things like that. But from a personal perspective, I really like that. I also, if I'm thinking selfishly, like I say, one of my big things in any business, I'm always wanting to create high-performing teams, drive efficiencies, improvements, productivity. And when you build people up in that kind of platform where they can do it, and you see your whole team outperform, and that's outstanding to see. When you can sit back and know that you've achieved it, it's like breath of fresh air. It's usually hard getting there, but it's normally worth it in the end.
And I think that for me, that's the right reasons for people getting into management. Do you know what I mean? It's to keep a platform, like I say, to succeed. So I love that. On the flip side, what do you hate about it? What's the most challenging thing, would you say, about management?
I think I'd probably go back to what you said before. I think the maintaining a positive culture is quite difficult. If you get there, getting there is even harder. But to maintain it, you have to keep on it. You can't get complacent. The dealing with kind of if you're going in somewhere and you're dealing with kind of absence of structure within a business and things like that, it's extremely challenging to build that, especially if there's a lack of investment for whatever reason, if it's not possible. And then dealing with difficulties. So going into management roles, when I've went into roles directly into management where I'm inheriting a team. You're always dealing with difficult employees at that point, and because you're going through a period of building that respect. That's one of the most difficult ones, is trying to, for me, is that dealing with difficult employees and trying to build relationships with others, but then you find you spend a lot more time with the difficult employees because you're trying to get them up to a certain level.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, if you think of how you are as a person and how you manage, I guess there's been loads of influences on you throughout your career, and I love what you said about your dad in terms of, here you are, son, you're at work.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And have you thought about why you are like you are? Because I guess that level of discipline is very different to how you are, but it must have put you in good stead at the same time.
100%. I think similar to yourself, I'm a bit of a people pleaser. I like to. One of the big things for me is I like people to think I'm good at my job. I like to leave people with a good perception of he can achieve a lot. He can do a great job. I like to leave people with that. But more importantly, I think having a young family, I think about the influence I want to leave. So I always think this kind of thing. There's a saying, there's a book that really influences me, and I reread it constantly. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Great book.
It's an outstanding book, and there's one of the habits where to begin with the end in mind, and it's kind of, what would you want people to see about you, kind of when you're no longer here? And I keep that in my mind. I'm like, what actions am I taking now that later on in life people will be discussing, kind of thing, or that I'll be leaving for my son when he's older, and all them types of, that's probably for me the biggest influence in why I'm so driven, I think.
Love that. And do you find now that you're, because I'll be honest with you, I struggle with my management style at home with my kids. It's incredibly different to my management style at work. I'm not a pleaser at home. It's difficult. So, I mean, how do the two sort of merge together for you? What do you say?
Exactly the same as what you said. It's massively difficult. I find that a lot of the things I've learned in leadership, when I sit back and reflect and think about it, I could probably apply better at home, because
I have those some thoughts.
Sitting down and really understanding. I mean, my son will come to us, like, he'll tell us something in like, say, like a flippant comment, and then when I think about it, it's like there's more to that. I should have delved. I should have probed. There's a reason he's done that, or he's come to us because he wants us to ask advice, but he's just trying to get it out of him. I think about that all the time. So it's something I try and work on, but I find it a lot easier at work than at home. I think because at home you've got even more of an emotional attachment there, you know what I mean? But I certainly try to. I mean, sometimes my partner will see it as if I'm sat in a conversation with us, she'll turn around, she'll say, stop using management techniques on us.
Guys, and leave Six Sigma around the house. But but no, I'm exactly the same. I constantly think, why do I deal with things differently at home than I do work? I never fly off the handle at work ever. But I do regularly with a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. So it's
very challenging.
I mean, do you think the way that your dad brought you up is sort of molded you, I guess, to who you are and
100%. I mean, especially when I started working with him, because from as a kid before that point, I'd never seen how hard working he was. I knew he was out of the house a lot at work, and he was always working all these hours. But until I worked with him, seeing how hard working he was, and it gave us a real appreciation for it. I'm thinking, he's not just out the house twiddling his thumbs for you.
I imagine for you that at that time and working with him, was the sense of, I want to make him proud, I want to work for him. You know what I mean? Was it that, I guess, as well?
There was. I mean, initially when I started, I worked on a product he developed. I worked on manufacturing. I always remember what a highlight for me dad was, his boss came on the production line. I was just sat working away, and he turned around, who's he? He's a real grafter. And my dad was like, it's my son, kind of thing. So that was a real proud moment for him. And he obviously saw me progress there as well, because I went into the production planning department, and that was good for him to see. There was a few times we clashed because then I was responsible for allowing the machine time he needed. So
Right.
but it builds that relationship as well in that respect outside of work, and it's been the same ever since. My dad's very respectful of the career I've had and where I am, and he's very proud. He always reiterates that.
Love that. And in terms of influences, I guess, in your career in the work environment, I mean, can you think of, do you know a couple of people you'd say, yeah, they were a big part of why I am where I am, would you say?
I think there's a few, to be honest, if I think back. So when I went into that production planning role in Cheadle initially, the senior production planner that took me off the shop floor and put me in there kind of saw a lot of potential when others didn't. So he put me into that role, and he left not long after that. But he's the one that set us up on getting into the diploma and all that. He said, like, this is what you should be looking at, what I think you're capable of. And for someone to sit there and say, right, I think you're capable of this,
yeah,
I kind of almost didn't want to let him down. And funny enough, when I left Cheadle, I went to work with him again. He actually took us from Cheadle to work with him. So I got to work with him again. A guy called Derek Davies, who's a very switched on guy. I mean, I learned a lot. So I class myself as a very highly skilled production planner. I think I could go in any industry and be a brilliant production planner. I'm very confident in that. But I learned everything from him, a lot from him. Extremely good planner. And he was a very approachable guy. You wouldn't think, so the relationship we had, it wasn't like a manager or anything. And that really kind of, as a young lad at the time, really stood out to me, because it was like, oh, it's not just because when you're on a production floor, you've got a supervisor, do this, do this, do this. Now I'm in the office and I've got this guy working alongside me, ultimately. He's wanting me to push things. I mean, he had us set up Kanbans, everything like that, and put a lot of lean stuff in place. But he would give us very little help. He would give us more guidance, because he thought I was capable of doing it myself. Yeah. But he would always say that. He'd say, I'm not telling you how to do it. He says, I'll give you some guidance. But so although I worked with him from a short period of time at Cheadle and then went on to work with him again for a further year, I learned a hell of a lot from him, and probably is a bit of what kind of leadership style I liked.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, what for you, how, I guess managers you've had, what type of leadership environment works well for you?
So for me, I think where I'm at now, in terms of, if I see some great leaders, I think the directors of this business, so I report directly into them, have given me nothing but autonomy since I've come into the business. So in the last 7 months, we've seen a massive transformation in terms of the way operations performs, even just how we visually portray ourselves, culture. We're bringing in a lot of people at one time, but it's fitting. So I'd say from where I'm at now, the leaders I've got in terms of recognizing they've brought me in to head up a department and allowing me the autonomy, but the trust to do that, when they are the business owners as well, has been a breath of fresh air, to be honest. And that's probably why I'm enjoying it so much. So autonomy is a big thing for me, in any leadership style. I very much, if I'm ever micromanaged, this is why I would never micromanage someone. I kind of put up a barrier if I'm micromanaged, and it's not something I like. I'm always vocal if I am as well. So it's
yeah, absolutely. I think, like you said, everything comes back to trust, doesn't it?
100%. Yeah,
it's a two-way process. And I think if you're trusting, you trust people. In effect, they should work effectively. I guess the challenge of that is sometimes that that trust can be abused by certain people. And that's the tricky side, isn't it? Because where do you go from that?
It is. That's where you've got to find the balance, isn't it? And then I think if you do have people that kind of betraying your trust and stuff, it needs to be kind of nipped in the bud quite quickly, because that can quickly spread across a team or a department, and that can start declining in culture, and people are beginning to see it as an acceptance. So for me, I'm very quick to act when I have things like that.
You look at AR Power as an example of a company which is a growing company, and I guess you've had the luxury to be able to almost create a culture, because you've not had decades of sort of people have been here for years and years, and it's culture. So how the other side of that, if you went into a company which, let's say a big corporate environment, been there for, they've got people there, been there for 20, 30 years, is it impossible to change a culture, or what's the steps someone could do to take to make that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's impossible. I mean, for me, the way I'd approach that is get people involved, listen to them, let them at least have a say. But I think it's important if you listening to people and you're not taking their advice on board, that you feed back as to why. You see, I think it's a good idea, but this is why we're not going to go with it. I think the worst thing you can ever do is get some advice off people, not listen to it, not feedback, but then not take it at the same time, because that'll just, you'll see people leave and your turnover increase. And it's
you're right. I think key what you said there as well is it's communication. Is also, if the ideas you implement essentially came from them, they're much more likely to be implemented correctly.
Yeah, 100%.
Perfect.
I mean, I use an example I've done. So since I've been in, one of the big things I do with my team is maybe on a weekly or fortnightly basis, I've been sitting with them saying, right, what we're doing well, what do we need to improve on? We keep it short. We don't go with extensive lists, just so we're continuing doing it. One of the biggest things I took from our last one, which was last week, was all the guys said we're taking action. So everything the guys are saying, we need to do this, can we do that? We're taking action against it. So we're seeing these improvements, we're investing, we're listening. And that for me was really positive to see. And then forums are really working as well, because it's getting everyone involved. And at the time, we can have that discussion, like a feedback at the time. If someone comes up with an idea, I'll say that's a great idea, but park it for now, because that's like a long-term investment thing. We're looking at get us to a point of where we're performing stably at a stable pace, and then we'll kind of look to go on the incline. And it's really working well. And like I say, I think getting everyone involved is the key to that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think people are a lot less likely to leave the business if they've had ideas that have been implemented. They'll feel part of the business, I guess.
Yes.
But I think the problem with some companies are that you just feel like you're just a number, and you have days going, if I wasn't here, nothing would, the business wouldn't change. They'd just replace me overnight.
100%. I mean, one of the biggest draws for me to ER Power was it's a family-run business. But it's massively increasing. I mean, the turnover is trebling on an annual basis at the minute, which is very hard to handle at times. Hence why one of the key reasons I came in, that challenge excites me. And we're managing it extremely well now. But with that, one of the biggest things I wanted to bring in was have us operate like a corporate business, and function like a corporate business, but not to lose that family feel where everyone's part of the team, where any of the guys, any of my team can come from the field and go in and speak to a director. And that's the kind of family feel we want within this business, but also to perform, like I say, like a corporate entity.
I think actually, when I've, on the recruitment side, one thing I've noticed probably post-COVID is that I think a lot of people now, they're the type of organizations people want to work with, because actually, not to stereotype, but what did happen a lot of with the larger companies over COVID, when they furloughed people, they furloughed them, and that's it. They didn't speak to them for 9 months. But the smaller companies where, employees were much, it's much more, they were thought about, and they was even when there was no news to give them, they communicated there was no news to give you. It meant so much to them. And I think people have come out of this situation and gone, I want to work for a business that cares about me, and I don't want to be a number anymore.
100%. I mean, one of the things I'd done during COVID, I mean, at the time I was employed by one of your clients we worked with. We communicated to people I had a team of over 40 people there, and we gave phone calls on a weekly basis just to check in with people.
I remember, and
see how we were doing.
Right. Yeah. It is, and that it doesn't go unnoticed, and people remember things like that.
100%. I mean, some of the phone calls could have were 2 minutes that I had. Some of them were up to an hour, because people had no one else to talk to.
So
exactly. They clung on to it, but I think it was vital that we'd done that, because there was a real risk of people not coming out that people could have went into that furlough stage and that lockdown without mental health issues, and then come out of it with mental health issues. So I think was vital that communication's maintained.
100%. At the time where it hit, I mean, we furloughed some staff, and when it first hit, and exactly that. I'll be honest with you, my thought process wasn't right. Whose numbers are the highest? I'm going to keep them. It was right. Okay, she lives by herself. She's going to be isolated. This person as a wife, they're not. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yes,
I'm going to go because I think their mental health will potentially suffer if I don't bring them in. And you know what? It worked really well in that respect.
Yeah.
Don't be wrong. I felt horrific for people we had to furlough and but they were all right because we kept in touch with them, and they had a partner there. They got on with things. They looked after. So there's no issues there. But it is you've got to look at why people are who they are, and you've got to think about things. So no, I love that. If you think about, say, the teams implemented. I mean, can you think of anything? Technology, a process, a strategy, anything that you've ever implemented throughout your whole career that, if you think about legacy, that you're quite proud of?
It's a tough one. So we first, in terms of management, when I first go back to my first management role, building a department, I think at such a young age, implementing processes where we had none, in one of the biggest corporate businesses in the world, to be honest, where those processes were then taken on throughout the wider business. At a time, so while I was doing that, I was also supporting projects of implementing softwares and things like that. And that, for me, I was extremely proud of the achievements I'd made, because I'd went in there with little knowledge of management. I mean, the investment I had from that business as well, in terms of leadership training, interviewing techniques. I mean, they invested heavily in the people. Again, something I believe in from that, because it put me in good stead to where I am now. So I'd probably see it there. I think building that department, building that team, and then successfully executing projects. When we started doing that, from having no technicians, no engineers, to having a full department that's successfully executing all this work, it was brilliant to be part of.
And so building the team then, if just to look at the granular, was it, like you say, was it a case of the recruitment process, the onboarding process, that comes about that? So
everything. So we had a very good recruitment department who would screen CVs, but I must have interviewed over 100 people easy to get that upwards of 30 plus technicians. Majority I'd had the pleasure of working with previously as a planner when I'd been there. So majority of people I took from internally, and it was people that wanted to come and work with me because they'd worked alongside me as a planner. They thought, we want to come and work for you, kind of thing. And that was very kind of nice going into a new management role.
Right, excellent stuff. I mean, in regard to, if you think about your journey from operator to where you are now, which was a perfect organic, and then you comparison to someone who goes down the academic route and potentially skips that sort of pre-learning stage and goes straight to management. I mean, what would you say is the, would you recommend either or route, I guess? Do you think the academics more important or the hands-on?
It's a tough one, because I think both have their advantages. I think I'd probably slightly edge towards the on-the-job learning. Reason I say that is I mentioned that when I first went into management, I went through extensive leadership training. I spent weeks on these leadership courses, where you're role playing and you're role playing scenarios, and you're learning empathic listening and all this other vital things to learn. But when it comes to putting them into practice, can be two totally different things. So I think the on the job learning is massive. For me, especially in management roles, because you can never prepare yourself for the first time. You have to sit in a disciplinary, or you have to sit in, no matter what learning you do will not prepare you for that. Or that's certainly from my experience.
I imagine that, you as ops manager now, when you're dealing with a team of planners, for example, presumably the respect you get for the career you've had must be easier than if you just come from university.
100%. I mean, there's slight things that we'll be doing, and we'll sit and see, we've got a planner and start looking at something for an hour. I'll skim over it and I'll be like, why don't you think of doing it this way? Or have you thought about doing it this way? And 2 seconds later, we've got a plan in place. It's like things like that. And but that's where I certainly add value. I give them the autonomy to try and figure it out first. But then if you struggle and comfortable, we'll look at it and we'll guide you to it, guide you to the right conclusion ultimately.
And you obviously see the importance of training, I guess. Has that been part and parcel of?
It's been massive, I think, because when I went into management, I was probably so nervous of like having never dealt with people, never had the management experience. When I went on the training, it was brilliant. But I mean, for me, I've done umpteen amounts of training. You see, for me, qualifications, and Lean Six Sigma and everything like that. And I think it is valuable because I mean, prior to doing the Lean Six Sigma training, I'd worked with continuous improvements. I'd implemented processes and things like that. But it wasn't until I'd done that training I thought I could have done that in a different way. I could have added more value to it, to be fair, if I'd sat and knew the ins and outs of it. But yeah, I think it's very valuable. I think for me as well, I like to share knowledge. So if you're gaining all this knowledge through training, I think it's very. I think you're never too old. I still do it now. I've recently just done my site manager training under CITB because I think you're never too old to learn. I mean, from my posts, I constantly read up on personal development books. I'm someone that's a great believer in that.
I think that shows. I mean, that it's not. It's the passion that comes from that, isn't it? I think that just if you're always thinking about your vision and why you are doing things, I think you're sharper.
100%.
And you mentioned, a young manager and how nerve-wracking that is and training you go through. I mean, knowing what you know now, if you could, give yourself advice on day one of management, as Paul walks in, what would you say to yourself now? Do you think
I think I mentioned before empathic listening. I think it's an absolutely brilliant tool. I think any manager should practice it. So in my first management scenario was you're thinking about what's coming, what's the end going to be. You're thinking about your decision up front. Shouldn't do it, but it happens. If you practice the empathic listening stuff, and it's something I do now, I go in any situation without having a decision or an outcome in my mind. I'll go in that situation with the view to listen, seek to understand what's going on, and then come to a conclusion. I think that's vital. If I could go back, I'd certainly do that. I think you can, young managers, especially myself, you can make rash decisions or you can think of the outcome before, because you get nervous yourself. You're thinking about the outcome, you want to prepare. But in hindsight, now, the age I'm at, I think 10 years later, I'm like, it probably wasn't the best process for me to go through.
I completely resonate with that. And I think I still do now to some extent. I've got a lot better at it. But when I find someone asks me a question and I know the answer, I get a satisfaction in telling them the answer.
Yes.
Fix something for them. But actually, you've got to question them and teach them to be able to not necessarily ask you next time. And okay, what do you think?
Yes,
I agree. It's that, isn't it? It's too easy just to answer.
100%, and it can come down. I mean, it comes down to being in. I mean, the position you're in. There's time pressures. The position I'm in, there's time pressures, and it's sometimes hard if you're under pressure. The time to sit and think. If someone comes to you with a question, to sit and think like they can get the answer themselves. I'm going to guide them through it. It's like 2 seconds and you can give them the answer.
It is. It's a real challenge, but it's a long game, isn't it? 100%.
100%, yeah.
So, and final question, but it's they're a different one. So, I mean, I'm passionate about management and helping young managers, but I'm also passionate about manufacturing and how we can improve manufacturing. You've worked it long enough now to see the peaks and troughs and what's happening right now. I mean, if we could improve, if you're the leader of the manufacturing world, how would you improve manufacturing if you could do?
I think it's for me, it's about finding a balance. So I've worked in manufacturing businesses that want to drive automation, and I've worked in manufacturing businesses that don't have any. They'd rather throw people at things as opposed to invest in automation. I think it's finding that balance because I think people are important. So I don't think the sole automation route is the direction businesses should take. I think it's about how businesses find that balance going forward, because I think it's important. I think we need to drive improvements. I mean, being in solar PV, I'm big on sustainability and the environment. I think manufacturing businesses need to invest heavily in that, but also in how they continue to develop sustainable manufacturing methods, including creating products through economical sound practices, and considering the impact on environments. I think that for me is the future of manufacturing, really, in terms of a lot of manufacturing businesses these days, they'll all have environmental policies in. I think, having been in manufacturing, I know the impacts that I had in environments. I also know there are energy prices. I think sustainability is key for manufacturing businesses, and people want to buy a sustainable product, an economic product. So for businesses to succeed in the future, that's where they're going to have to invest, in my opinion, because customers will ultimately want to start buying, whether we like it or not. It's the way the future's going. The economy needs to be more sustainable, and I think as manufacturing businesses, they need to start investing now in the research and development, how we improve it, how we really put our stamp on things. And I think that'll solidify a lot of manufacturing businesses' futures. If they get left behind, that there's a risk that they can't come back from that.
I completely agree. Excellent. And just very quickly, what was the next few years for AR Power? What's the plans there then? Big plans.
So we're massively focused on commercial at the minute. Funny enough, mentioning it, it's nice to see a lot of local manufacturing businesses are inquiring with us, which is really good to see. So the next few years for me, it is continuing building that team. Operational excellence is one thing I always speak about, but I'll also show people what my expectations are to get there, and really try and get the team's buy-in and stuff like that. So there's next exciting few months ahead in terms of the commercial projects we've got ongoing. We're trying to do a lot in a short space of time, which we've never done as a business in the history of the business. But we'll get there, we'll do it. And it's my role to build the team up to do that. So very exciting times ahead.
Good man. Excellent. Thank you very much, Chris. Appreciate that.
No problem.